In the silence of kindness, the most hidden form of violence is born. Friedrich Nietzsche. Before we begin, here's a small ritual. Write in the comments one word that accurately describes your current state. Sign it, and let's get started. Silence can carry a fierce undertone. Although it appears gentle, it may conceal a raw, fiery energy. A seemingly good person who avoids any act of physical violence may still strike others with a single unyielding glance, a half-spoken judgment, or a subtle gesture of disapproval. This is not the obvious form of brutality that most people recognize. It is a silent force, an undercurrent of tension that shapes relationships, undermines self-esteem, and demands obedience without uttering a command. Friedrich Nietzsche, a thinker who confronted the pillars of morality and the masks of virtue, offers a stark insight into this hidden domain. He believed that moral systems often disguise a deep internal turmoil, a refusal to look inward at one's own capacity for resentment, hostility, and frustration. When someone insists on being perfectly good, they may repress their own darkness. That darkness does not vanish. Instead, it slips through subtle cracks in the psyche, manifesting as quiet tyranny or covert aggression. Goodness, then, can become a barrier. The individual who denies personal shadows and brims with righteous behavior can become the most manipulative figure of all, simply because their violence is cloaked in compassion. This is not the kind of harm that roars or breaks doors. It is the kind that whispers, that instills guilt, that demands conformity without ever raising its voice. This form of hidden violence resonates so deeply because it can appear caring. People seldom protect themselves from what they perceive as kindness. They open their hearts, trusting that gentle souls have no harmful motives. Yet, the tension in the air grows thick with unspoken demands. The so-called good person might feel superior, carrying an internal scoreboard of moral achievements. They do not lash out with fists. Instead, they radiate disapproval, expecting others to mirror their self-denial, sacrifice, and piety. This landscape of silent aggression deserves attention. Nietzsche's perspective illuminates the reality that ignoring one's inner shadows does not eliminate them. It only causes them to resurface in more refined, more insidious forms. By denying their capacity for darkness, people unknowingly nurture it. Rather than transparent cruelty, they produce guilt and shame in others. Rather than honest confrontation, they opt for passive intimidation. The atmosphere becomes heavy with judgment, but few recognize its true source. Conclusion. The greatest danger often arises not from flamboyant evil, but from unrecognized good. When a person refuses to confront the darker aspects of themselves, their virtue transforms into a breeding ground for concealed violence. Many who define themselves as purely good discover that they cannot tolerate any show of force, anger, or confrontation. They pride themselves on staying calm, keeping the peace, and offering kindness at all costs. Beneath this surface of compliance, however, lies a hidden imperative. Others must follow the same unwritten code. They must remain pleasant, harmonious, and polite, or risk being judged as disruptive or cruel. This unspoken demand often emerges when a good person feels discomfort in the presence of more direct emotional expressions. They might say nothing, yet their silence speaks volumes. Their gaze grows cold whenever someone chooses to openly express frustration or set a boundary. The need for perpetual gentleness becomes a moral weapon. Anyone who challenges this atmosphere of seemingly saintly behavior is met with veiled disapproval. The notion of goodness here is not about true empathy. It serves as a shield, blocking genuine connection by avoiding honest conflict. A person who cultivates this mask can expertly manipulate others into assuming the role of the aggressor. If you dare to raise your voice or assert your needs, the gentle individual can feign hurt, implying that you have broken the sacred rule of kindness. In a sense, they leverage their perceived fragility to exert subtle dominance. Nietzsche's writings highlight how moral posturing can be a path to power. Instead of dominating through brute force, this approach ensures compliance through guilt and social pressure. The kind soul casts themselves as the moral superior, stirring an environment in which everyone else feels compelled to tiptoe around delicate sensitivities. Anger, directness, or even healthy self-assertion becomes taboo. When a person constantly signals their perfect goodness, they exert a passive sort of control. By setting themselves on a pedestal of compassion, they coax others into a system of self-censorship. Friends, family, or colleagues might internalize the message that expressing anything but kindness is unacceptable. The social setting grows stifling, limiting genuine emotional exchange. Suppression replaces authenticity, and relationships lose their dynamic quality. The main issue lies in the pretense. True goodness does not deny the existence of frustration or the necessity of conflict. True goodness allows space for anger or disappointment, acknowledging these feelings without resorting to blame or subtle forms of retribution. Yet the mask of gentleness maintains its form by negating all darker impulses. Those impulses must go somewhere, so they transform into microaggressions, silent scorn, and moral grandstanding. This is the quiet war waged by an overly compliant personality. Conclusion: one who refuses to face their own capacity for aggression becomes a master at punishing others without ever raising their voice. By demanding absolute gentleness, they sustain an atmosphere of quiet coercion. When someone denies their shadow, they project it onto the world around them. This creates a split. They see themselves as purely benevolent, while perceiving malice, selfishness, or malintent in everyone else. It is never their fault, never their anger, never their envy. They cling to a spotless image, wearing kindness like a shining robe. Yet in that dazzling whiteness, a hidden violence brews. This is the violence of shame. The good person, unwilling to accept their own negativity, often shames others for displaying what they themselves cannot face. If a friend exhibits a flare of temper, the good person might respond with a quiet gasp or a pained expression, conveying that such behavior is unthinkable. In doing so, they pass judgment without words. They refuse direct confrontation, yet their demeanor transmits an unspoken reprimand. This dynamic can erode even the closest bonds. Partners and friends become fearful of showing genuine emotions, worried that any outburst might draw silent condemnation. The good person never strikes in open conflict. Instead, they orchestrate a subtle campaign of moral superiority. They believe their gentleness is evidence of high character, and they expect others to conform or feel guilty for not doing so. When faced with someone who refuses to be shamed, the self-proclaimed kind soul may become passive-aggressive. They might withdraw affection, make offhand remarks about decency, or emphasize how hurt they feel by the other's behavior. None of these reactions appear blatantly hostile, yet they inflict emotional harm with precision, pressing on tender spots of vulnerability. The target is left feeling unworthy, disrespected, or misunderstood. In Nietzsche's view, this mechanism underpins many moral ideologies. By refusing to see themselves as flawed, people become the arbiters of what is correct, respectable, or dignified. They police others with disapproval, hoping to enforce a worldview that upholds their own sense of virtue. Instead of exploring the darkness within, they declare that darkness belongs out there, in those who fail to adopt the same moral stance. In time, this invisible violence corrodes authenticity. Relationships revolve around performance, as everyone scrambles to appear nice enough, gentle enough, enlightened enough. The result is a collective suppression of real desires, honest struggles, and raw emotions. The presence of the good person stands as a silent warning. Do not step out of line, or you will be deemed lacking in character. Conclusion: kindness that cannot acknowledge its own shadow becomes a hidden force of oppression. By shaming others for qualities it refuses to own, it perpetuates a cycle of quiet aggression, masked as moral purity. Nietzsche taught that the drive to appear morally flawless can be rooted in resentment. When someone strives for unwavering goodness, they often harbor a silent bitterness toward those who freely express the impulses they have denied. This bitterness festers and hardens into self-righteousness, which is then paraded as moral high ground. A trap emerges. By crafting a perfect image, The person locks themselves into an endless performance. They fear stepping outside the bounds of gentleness or compassion, terrified that even the smallest slip might tarnish their pristine reputation. Unable to display anger or struggle openly, they funnel these feelings into subtle manipulations of others. The more they suppress, the more they expect everyone else to follow suit. This perfect image can lure admirers who aspire to the same pristine status, creating an echo chamber of praise and polite interactions. Yet the soul beneath the surface starts to suffocate. Real emotions build up like steam, searching for an outlet. In many cases, this outlet takes the form of moral lecturing, condescending pity, or a pitying glance that signals the other's lack of virtue. Beneath this performance lies profound loneliness. Because the person refuses to be genuinely vulnerable, others never witness their authenticity. They see only a facade of kindness. Whenever tension arises, the good person shrinks from honest dialogue. They might respond with a sweetly stated platitude, a small sigh, or a chastising gaze. This prevents genuine resolution, leading to a sense of unresolved pressure in relationships. By constantly wearing this angelic mask, the individual loses contact with vital pieces of their own psyche. They neglect the capacity for self-defense, righteous anger, or protective fierceness. These traits are demonized as incompatible with moral perfection, yet they are part of a complete human experience. Denying them leads to internal fragmentation, further fueling the cycle of moral superiority and quiet control. Conclusion. The obsessive quest for a perfect image destroys the chance for true self-discovery. In seeking to appear flawless, the individual turns their own soul into a battleground, where denied aspects become ammunition for hidden forms of aggression. When anger or aggression is deemed unacceptable, it often turns inward. The individual who prides themselves on never hurting anyone else may regularly inflict pain on their own psyche. They become both the judge and the condemned, constantly scrutinizing their behavior to ensure it meets the highest standards of virtue. This internal scrutiny can grow into self-flagellation. Any small lapse in kindness triggers waves of guilt or shame. The person berates themselves for feeling irritated, for having an impolite thought, or for wanting something that conflicts with their moral image. In effect, they transform their hidden aggression into a harsh, self-punishing cycle. By turning aggression inward, they may appear even more saintly to the outside world. After all, they never lash out at others. They carry a calm demeanor, often described as gentle and long-suffering. Yet beneath that surface, a seething cauldron of self-condemnation boils. Paradoxically, the more they suppress their negative emotions, the more powerful these emotions become, ready to erupt in subtle or twisted ways. This inner executioner takes a heavy toll on mental health. Feelings of worthlessness, anxiety, or depression can creep in, fueled by the relentless demand to remain good at all times. The person locks themselves in a prison of self-imposed expectations. Whenever they fail, they unleash the hidden violence upon themselves. In relationships, this self-directed anger can morph into martyrdom. The good individual adopts the role of the perpetual sufferer, silently pointing out how much they sacrifice, how patient they remain, how deeply they care. Others may feel they must tiptoe around this self-imposed martyr, mindful that the smallest breach of decorum might trigger another wave of self-punishment. It becomes an emotional tug-of-war where guilt is the rope. Conclusion. Repressing aggression turns one's own mind into a battleground. The refusal to acknowledge anger or frustration outwardly leads to an inward assault, fueling a pattern of self-blame and moral exhaustion. Morality can be a potent tool for exerting influence. When an individual positions themselves as a beacon of virtue, they gain leverage over those who do not share their glowing reputation. They do not need to issue orders or raise their voice. Instead, they rely on the intangible force of guilt and social expectation to guide behavior. Within a group setting, this dynamic grows more powerful. A person who consistently displays acts of kindness or generosity can accrue a form of moral capital. Their peers may admire them, feeling indebted or even intimidated by such relentless benevolence. In turn, The virtuous individual, often unknowingly, seizes the role of unspoken judge. They embody the standard of conduct. Anyone who deviates from this standard risks silent condemnation. This indirect method of control can surpass the brute force used by overtly aggressive personalities. While a tyrant might browbeat others into submission, the relentlessly good person can orchestrate compliance through unspoken intimidation. Eyes lowered in disappointment, a faint sigh of disapproval, or a gentle reminder of what is considered proper can prompt others to correct their course swiftly. The result is a subtle yet powerful system of domination maintained without visible coercion. Though this arrangement can appear harmonious, it often conceals deeper layers of tension. Those around the morally imposing figure may suppress their genuine thoughts and emotions, wary of being deemed rude or insensitive. A collective sense of obligation arises, fueled by the dread of letting down someone who is invariably kind. Over time, resentment builds. The group feels stifled, while the virtuous individual perceives their own influence as purely benevolent. Nietzsche argued that this form of moral guardianship stunts the growth of authentic individuality. People become so anxious to uphold the group's shared moral code that they ignore personal insights, creative impulses, or raw emotional states. The group fosters an atmosphere of uniform politeness and well-meaning gestures, but at the cost of honesty and freedom. The good leader remains at the center, seemingly blameless, as others internalize the oppression on their behalf. In a family setting, such moral dominance might revolve around someone who is consistently patient and giving. Their unwavering generosity stands as an unspoken rule. No one else may express anger, frustration, or dissatisfaction without feeling disloyal. At holiday gatherings or communal events, any flicker of genuine human conflict is quickly hushed under the weight of that person's silent presence. The narrative of goodness holds the entire family in its sway, overriding nuance or depth. Conclusion: moral superiority can function as a quiet dictatorship. By claiming the highest moral ground, a person subtly commands conformity. Their kindness becomes a guiding principle that others dare not challenge, lest they be branded ungrateful or cruel. Real kindness arises from the willingness to meet one's own darkness. True compassion is not a stage performance. It emerges when a person acknowledges their capacity for anger, fear, and resentment, then integrates those forces into a balanced sense of self. This integration allows them to interact with others from a place of honesty rather than hidden agendas or unspoken demands. When someone begins to accept their shadow, they realize that aggression can be a means of self-protection. It can guard personal boundaries or defend cherished values. Likewise, envy or bitterness can illuminate unfulfilled desires, pointing toward unmet needs. These emotions, once labeled as forbidden, become signals for growth. By receiving them openly, a person can learn to harness that energy constructively instead of repressing it beneath a facade of perpetual kindness. This acceptance of darkness dissolves the hidden violence that once lurked behind polite smiles. People who own their own capacity for harm are less likely to harm others unconsciously. They no longer need to police the emotions of those around them or impose a standard of unyielding gentleness. Instead, they engage in open dialogue, recognizing that conflict can be an opportunity for deeper understanding rather than a threat to one's moral identity. From Nietzsche's standpoint, the individual who embraces every aspect of their humanity moves beyond narrow moral codes. They stop seeking external approval for their goodness and start valuing personal integrity. They take responsibility for their choices, neither glorifying nor denying the potential within them for aggression. This self-awareness becomes a wellspring of authentic power, shining through in moments of both kindness and confrontation. Such a person might still show compassion, but it is a compassion rooted in empathy, not obligation. If they offer help or support, it is done freely, without the desire to appear saintly or to mask hidden resentments. They can set boundaries without guilt, refusing to adopt the role of martyr or moral gatekeeper. They do not need to manipulate situations to prove their virtue. Instead, they stand firmly in the reality of their own multifaceted nature. Conclusion: only by embracing our darkness do we discover genuine light. Free from the compulsion to appear flawless, we allow our relationships to blossom in honesty. Empowered by the understanding of our own capacity for both creation and destruction, we become truly alive, capable of real kindness, real courage, and real love. We're sure you've discovered plenty of value, so subscribe now and stay connected.